The small village of Eyam in the Derbyshire Dales, or a place between streams, may have been around since the Bronze Age in some form or another, although the presence of stone circles and barrows nearby hint at an even older occupation in the area. Now, we think Eyam village was officially founded and named by the Anglo-Saxons, but the Romans valued it for other reasons. They found lead, and heavy mining was the main source of income for a long time. And lead coins have been found bearing the names of many Roman emperors. And the village was named in the Domesday Book as Eyam, A-R-U-M. Now, the church, St Lawrence Church, dates to the 13th century, and the Norman pillars inside it, which may well rest on Saxon foundations from a much earlier church on the same site. Now, of course, the churchyard has this striking Saxon cross, which I've covered recently. And set on the south wall of the church, not far from the Saxon cross, is this interesting sundial. It was built by William Shaw in 1775 and inscribed with not just the hours but the months, days, signs of the zodiac, and pointers to other locations including Mecca, Tenerife and Quebec. And just below the sundial there are these stones with the Celtic images on it, and they're said to be Knights Templars coffin lids. Also quite close to the Saxon cross is this interesting altar tomb of Catherine Mumpson. She was a wife of the Reverend Mumpson, who chose to stay with her husband in Eyam and helped him to care for the plague victims and their families throughout the crisis. Sadly, she died before the plague had run its course. The skull and crossbone images set on the side of this tomb also associated with Freemasonry and the Knights Templar. I did see a couple more could be Freemasonry gravestones. There are also a lot of yew trees around the graveyard, as there usually are, but none I would guess is older than the church itself. And a lot of them seem to be growing out of the actual graves. But the yew tree is, the roots of the yew tree growing into the grave is said to cleanse the soul, so that might be the reason. On entering the church, the first thing I noticed was the modern stained glass plague window. Despite all the historical features, a lot of people come to the church to see this alone. And the colourful panels are telling the story of Reverend Mumpson and the plague of Eyam. And it starts on the low left panel with the delivery of the fatal package of cloth from London. I bet you can hear my dog dreaming in the background. Above this is a ring of roses. It's a reminder of the deadly origin that the nursery rhyme had. Then above that again is a deathbed scene of the poor tailor, the first Eyam native to die. On the next panel, it depicts the meeting between William Mumpson and Thomas Stanley, the previous rector. And it's where the two men decided on the courageous step of quarantining the entire village. And on the lower right panel it shows two lovers who lived on different sides of the quarantine line, which I'll tell you about in a bit. And the striking central panel shows Reverend Mumpson surrounded by villagers rising above a depiction of St Lawrence Church. And there are small quarterfoils above the panels which show other local scenes, including Mumpson's Well, which is where people from neighbouring villages left goods for natives of the Eyam to purchase. Now we also have these late 16th and early 17th century murals, quite striking. And some of them have been skillfully restored. Now this intriguing one, the painting of the skeleton on the belfry arch. It may represent St Lawrence something, but it's also said to be a reminder of mortality. I like that. Here we see the pipe organ. It was made by Brindley and Forster, dating from 1879. Now, one of the church's unusual interior items, which I didn't see, was a Bronze Age burial urn, and it's dated around 1500 BC, and it was found on Eyam Moor. And then we have this late Saxon font with its blind arcading or blind windows around a simple pot and like a pyramidal shaped base. Very nice. The story of Eyam Plague Village started August 1665, when the village tailor Alexander Hadfield sent for cloth from London, which was now under the ravages of a great plague. And when the bale of cloth arrived at his home, Alexander's assistant, George Vickers, opened it and noticed it was damp, so he hung it out by the fireplace to dry. Unknown by the two men, the cloth was riddled with infected flea larvae. And on September the 7th, George became Eyam's first fatality of the plague. By the end of the month, another 5 people had died. By this time, the Reverend Mompesson and Thomas Stanley, the previous rector, were desperate to maintain some sort of order and control to restrict the spread of the disease and to prevent it reaching the neighbouring industrial city of Sheffield, as well as the surrounding villages. His idea was for the village to go into self-quarantine, shutting its borders and preventing anyone from leaving or entering in an attempt to squash the spread, knowing this meant imminent death to everybody. Now the surrounding villages seemed to appreciate their efforts and made sure the 800 people of Eyam were provided with food and medicine. The Eyam villagers would leave coins inside holes that were made in stones, like the cool stone. They'd fill these holes up with vinegar to disinfect the money, and the other villagers would leave the food and medicines at the stones. They were not to go beyond the boundary. And by October 1666, John Hancock, who with his 2 sons and 4 daughters, all died of the plague. And many of the survivors had the added indignity of moving their deceased loved ones by tying ropes around their feet and dragging them to the fields, so as not to be in contact with the infection. Now poor old Elizabeth Hancock was forced to bury 6 of her children and her husband, who were all taken by the plague within 8 days of each other. You can still see the graves on Eyam today under the protection of the National Trust. One man who failed to heed this advice was a bloke called Marshall Howe. Now Marshall had caught the plague and against all odds recovered, and believing that he could not catch it twice, he decided to make some extra cash by turning his hand to grave digging. He stood to earn a pretty decent income from it. He topped this up by stealing the clothes and other possessions of the dead. Although Marshall did survive the plague, he lost his young child and wife, and it's thought that he caught the plague from the infected clothes of the deceased that Marshall had stolen from. There's also the story of the 2 lovers, Roland Torr and Emma Siddell, who were betrothed when the plague hit. Now Emma lived in Eyam with her family, and Roland in the neighbouring village. Each night they would sneak out and meet secretly, whispering or probably shouting, across the river to each other, until one night Emma stopped coming. The story goes that as soon as the quarantine was lifted, Roland was one of the first into the village, eager to find Emma, but sadly she'd already died, leaving him heartbroken. Horrible story. The plague had claimed the lives of 260 men, women and children from 76 families, and it was due to the bravery and sacrifice of the villagers and the leadership skills of Mompson and Stanley that the plague did not take hold elsewhere. Potentially this saved the lives of thousands by preventing the spread to nearby densely populated cities. Even after a year, the plague was still claiming its victims, and on the 25th of August 1666, Catherine Mompson, wife of the rector, who had stuck by her husband instead of fleeing, finally succumbed and was buried in the church graveyard. It appears that the people of Eyam did not always respect their heritage as they do today. A fairly large piece of the Anglo-Saxon cross was broken up for domestic use. The 2 lime trees planted either side of Mrs. Mompson's grave were cut down for timber. Ploughing was allowed around the Riley graves, and some of the plague victims' gravestones are pulled up to floor houses and barns. Is this why the village is so haunted? A former maid has reportedly seen Catherine Mompson's ghost appear in the village rectory, walking up the back stairs wearing a big hat, along with other strange happenings, including doors opening and closing and phantom footsteps in the dead of night. Then you have Eyam Hall, which was built in 1671 and incorporates a smaller and much earlier part of a house. And the hall hosts the ghost of Sarah Miles, who was a young servant who drowned in the well. And there's also the ghost of an older man who frequents a room upstairs, which has now been permanently locked. There's also reports of a ghostly white horse is said to haunt the grounds of the hall. And then you've got the Miner's Arms, a 17th century inn, originally named King's Head, built in 1630. The name changed to the Miner's Arms following regular meetings of local mine owners, and it's reputed to be very haunted. Apparitions include an elderly woman wearing a black bonnet, black boots and a cape. It's been suggested she was a former landlord's wife who was murdered in the 17th century. Also, 2 young girls are reported to haunt the pub. Apparently they died in a fire here in the building that stood on the site prior to 1630, and they're said to be responsible for childlike pranks and giggling noises. And people have heard footsteps and experienced some strange occurrences in the bedrooms, and some guests have even left in the middle of the night because of fright. And then there's the plague cottages, a must-visit location you want to experience the supernatural apparently. One of the cottages is haunted by a pleasant-faced lady who wears a blue smock, and she's reported to awaken people in the middle of the night with a smile. And I also read at nearby Bretton Clough, the Celtic name meaning the farm of Britons, and it's got an eerie reputation locally and haunted by a ghost of a huntsman, claimed to have been seen by a former vicar and 2 sisters who owned Moorseats Hall in Haversige. And in 1930, a Dr. Mary Andrews, a local author, heard a haunting horn on the clough, and she could not find an explanation until years later she heard the legend of the Wild Hunt, or Gable Hounds, which in mythology is a pack of spectral hounds led by a figure in white on a white horse, usually on stormy nights, and is said to be foretelling the death of somebody in the neighbourhood. And there's also weird sightings of a phantom cyclist, seen by many locals at night, sometimes heard but not seen, and often sighted in pouring rain but without a spot of water on his cape as he hurtled past the astonished locals. And unsurprisingly, many visitors say that they can't walk past the headstones dotted around the surrounding area without feeling chills. I've got to mention the nursery rhyme, Ring a Ring a Roses, as it relates to the symptoms of the plague. And the roses relate to the rash on the chest that would appear. The posies were used to mask the smell of the plague, and sneezing was a final stage of the illness before dying.
Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down.